I'll start by introducing myself, I guess. My name is Gus Worth, and I've been teaching, I'm trying to think, 20-something years. I actually came late to education. I was 34, 35 years old, and when I went to university, I went as an adult, as a fully fledged adult with 20 years of work experience behind me. And I taught mostly at third level, university level, and I have been, since I came to Bulgaria. I live in Bulgaria now. I've been teaching English as well as in the university as a foreign language, and teaching, probably because I came late to teaching, I probably had different attitudes to it than maybe some people. I'm not certain, but first. Okay, hello. A couple of people are saying hello. Okay. So, as I say, I'm Irish, and I hope you can understand the Irish accent. Some people struggle a little bit with the Irish accent. And there's a couple of messages. I just have a look here. Yeah, and just different names. Yes, okay. Student engagement in an online English lesson is probably a very ambitious title, because people say, "Oh, wow, what can you do? What can you do to get them engaged?" And it isn't easy, I think, to get students engaged. Probably what most of you do is you think back to good teachers that you've had in the past. Say, what did they do? Right? And the problem with that, and that's very good advice. I mean, it's better to look at the good teachers, I think, than the bad ones. But I think the essence of being a good teacher is to be yourself and to find your own way. Right? Some people can tell jokes. Some people can, make the material interesting. Some people just have an energy and a buzz about them, and various factors come into play to student engagement. So it's not just a question of given a set of instructions, it's bang, you have the students are doing it. Right? Life doesn't work that way. Right? It doesn't work that way at all. And so I'll move on to the second slide. So having fun, right, is one thing. Laughing and jokes. Right? What is having fun? Right? You do sort of say laughing, jokes. Right? Can you teach by laughing and jokes all the time? Possibly not. Right? Maybe. Yeah. And I remember once, about 4 or 5 years ago, in the university, one of the fellow professors came to me and he said, "Gus," he said, "what do you do in that class? They're laughing all the time. Do you just tell jokes?" And it actually gave me a bit of a jolt, because I said, am I concentrating too much on telling jokes? Right? And it is part of my way of doing it. I like telling jokes, and I probably would tell at least one joke in every class, and I probably will today as well at some point. Right? But the problem with telling jokes is one, the student might not find them funny. Right? There could be cultural problems. Right? Can you in the modern era tell a blonde joke? And one of my favorite jokes is a blonde joke. And for a long time I was blonde myself. I could get away with it. Unfortunately now I'm grey, so it doesn't work by being blonde. Okay, but having fun to me though is not necessarily about laughing and jokes. It's just to enjoy what you're doing. Then you're having fun, right? And you could be doing something really serious, really challenging, right? And you're having fun, right? For me, for example, if you said to me, "Gus, we're going to go mountain climbing and it's very dangerous, and you're up at a big height. And I don't think no matter what I would do, I would find that fun or enjoyable. I just don't like heights, and I don't particularly like, climbing mountains or anything like that. I'd walk up a mountain, no problem. Climb it, no. But there'd be some people who would find that the danger and the thrill, and is fun, right? So you do need to figure out what students define as having fun. So I'm just to go back to this, right? Google it, you can find this test, right? And what it basically says is that there's different types of intelligence. There's different ways to be smart, right? And like for instance, sports people, right? Elite sports people, they have to put in a lot of effort, right, to be successful. And a lot of the time, sports people would not be regarded as being very smart. And we have a tendency to say intelligence is academic intelligence. And to be honest, having worked 25 years in universities, I'm not so certain about this academic intelligence. It's the professors themselves. They have decided that's the only type of intelligence. So the first two then would be part of that academic intelligence: linguistic, words and language, logical, mathematical, logic and numbers. And yes, you can, there's so many disciplines that are based around those. You become good at it, right? You're intelligent. And if you find somebody that loves, I don't know, bridge engineering or medical or whatever it is that they're learning, they're enjoying it, they're having fun, right? The next person may not. I'll just have a quick look at the chat in case anyone's saying anything that's okay. Just a few introductions. Okay, so the next one, the musical sound rhythm. So many people in the world that make their living through music, through sound, DJs, singers, orchestras, and so forth. Writing songs, which connects to the first one. And then bodily kinesthetic, body movement control. This is like sports people and maybe firefighters and whatever else, but they then spatial visual, where they have to see the things, where they have to imagine them, artists, sculptors, such like. And then there's interpersonal, which is other people's feelings, which understanding people, being able to communicate, being able to feel empathy for people, to be able to put yourself in their shoes. And all of this, and then intrapersonal self-awareness, making yourself better, right? Self-improvement and so forth. So these are what Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence. Obviously, it's not perfect. You can criticize it and all that, but it is very useful, right? In allowing people to figure out how they best like to learn. And I think you need to get some idea of how people learn, and how, if they like to hear things, they like music, if they like to physically do things, right? If my job here today was to teach you how to drive a car, right, I'd be struggling, right? Because you have to get in that car and you have to be able to use it, right? There's a lot of people out there that find they can learn how to do something by watching a YouTube video, right? And that's the best way for them, right? There's other people who like having a teacher to explain everything step by step. We all have different ways. We all have different different ways to learn, and as such, different ways to teach. Yeah. So I have a tendency to use this early on in any course. You know, I use it in the university. I use it in the English language courses. I use it. I try to do it. It only takes about 20 minutes in the class to do the test. As I say, Google it. You can find them online. You can have them self-evaluating. They add everything up to 70 questions. And it helps them to understand how best they like to learn. And it's very, very useful. Okay, so you find out what way do you like to learn: visual, practical, challenging, right? For some people are not having fun unless there's a challenge to it, right? If you're an elite sports person, it's the challenge. If you like chess, it's the challenge of winning Scrabble. It could be anything, right? It's the challenge. And then there's a lot of people out there, they love working on teams. They're happy to be part of a team and to feel that, you know, they can achieve a lot more. Right? If you're a soccer fan, for instance, you will know that there's 11 different positions on a soccer team, right? And if you have 11 goalkeepers, you will win nothing. If you have 11 strikers, you will win nothing. You need all the different elements. And a lot of people like that idea of working as a team, right? And they like the opposite then. There's a lot of people out there like working alone, right? And this is, to me, one of the joys of teaching online. It's you could do both, right? It's much harder in a classroom, right? I used to teach communications, and I'd sometimes do role play. And, you know, doing role play in a classroom sometimes can be difficult. Right? In online, you can just put them in separate rooms and do it all, and the other people doing things are not distracting them. But like I say, you could do it, and you could do it people working alone. And again, different strokes for different folks. Simple as that. So then the other thing is exploring solutions. You know, a lot of people like having like a puzzle, something to solve. Right? And again, you know, they all come into the last one of having fun. If they're doing things the way they like doing them, you know, you're going to get them engaged. Right? If you're forcing somebody to work as a team when they hate it, right? And if you're forcing somebody to work alone when they hate it, or if you're making things too challenging, some people like it to feel as if they're not learning anything at all. It's just having fun, and somehow by having fun, they're learning. So you really should put a little effort into trying to find out what way do you like to learn, and then see how much of these elements that you can do in the classroom. And so let's go through them. Right? Teamwork versus working alone. It can be a cultural issue. I found when I was in Ireland, I was teaching some Irish people, some East Europeans, quite a few Indians from different parts of the Indian subcontinent, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal, and places, Bangladesh. And also we had a load of Chinese students. Right? And the Chinese just wanted to do exercises. They wanted text-based stuff. They didn't want debates. They didn't want to talk. They just wanted written stuff, right? And the Indians in general, it didn't seem to matter from which part of the subcontinent they were from. They liked the talking. They liked debating. And so it can be a cultural issue, right? I find here in Bulgaria, Bulgarians don't really like talking too much, or the spotlight being on them. They prefer, you know, to sort of keep in the background a bit. So the American system of them always doing presentations doesn't really happen so much here in Bulgaria. But again, trial and error. There's an element of trial and error that will do it. And like I said, the advantage of Vedimo, you know, or any online things is that you can put them into groups, and they are discrete groups that the teacher can just walk in and out of, and potentially you can have those working in different ways. They don't have to, they can do the same topic, but approach it in different ways depending on how you create the groups. So allow them the choice, allow them to work as a group, or do so in a particular way, or allow them to do it alone if they want to. Right? There are some students who just really want to work alone. I had a very close friend of mine all the way through university, and he absolutely hated having to give presentations. He hated working with other people. These are the advantages. So how to do it, how to make it. I think one of the clues of making a class interesting is to try not have anything last too long. So if you're doing videos, short videos, right? Maybe followed by a quiz. I have followed by a quiz on all of these, probably because a short quiz can make it feel like it's just part of the normal thing. You're just having a bit of fun, short quiz. But quizzes do allow the teacher, to get an idea of are they understanding it? Are you getting through to them? And if you want to get through to people, right? You do have, as a teacher, you have to become good at body language. You've got to be able to look into their eyes and see are they engaged or not. And particularly young students, because I've got quite a few what I would classify as adults, people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And there's a different buzz than teaching, say, freshman students in a university, right? Freshman students in a university are experts at looking like they're attentive, they're listening, when they're not listening at all, right? So short videos followed by a quiz, or short presentations, short sound bites. It allows you to use different methods, right? Use sound, use video to get them to do the work, to get people working alone, people working in different ways. Okay, practical then, working through exercises as a class or alone, but hands-on. The practical stuff has to be hands-on, right? Real conversations. I used to do this quite regularly, where I'd have conversation classes, and I tried to have real conversations. Ask them about their life and so forth. If any of you have ever done the IELTS test or Cambridge or one of those, you know that part of it is oral. And they ask you questions about your life, about your hometown, about your family, about whatever. And they're trying to determine, are you fluent? Are you able to have a conversation? So real conversations, which are practical. So you could teach people how to order things in a restaurant, how to order things in a shop, how to give directions to a taxi driver, right? All of these, right, are useful. Right? It was one of the things I first learned when I came to Bulgaria, was how to say left and right, how to go straight ahead and so forth. And I could do that within a couple of weeks of coming to Bulgaria. I could just about explain to a taxi driver, my house is in the mountains. And it was in the days before Google Maps when I first came to Bulgaria. Okay, so asking them about their life, about music, sports, fashion, asking them about something that they're actually interested in, right? If you have a club, like it's a chess club or a soccer club or whatever it is, right? They learn because they have to, yeah. So again, if it's practical, I would argue that if you're trying to be practical and you're trying to have real conversations, you probably shouldn't. If you correct the grammar, you lose the flow, you lose the thing. But this area in English language teaching about whether you should constantly correct people or not is debatable, right? But I would certainly say that let them speak, and Other one is singing your favorite songs, right? And this is the thing that you do with kids, right? You do in the kindergarten. They sing their favorite songs. If you're teaching English, even as a foreign language, you almost certainly would have them singing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and blah, blah. And they're singing and they're learning, right? And that seems to go away, right? I've lost track of the amount of people have said to me here in Bulgaria that they learned English through singing songs and listening to songs on the radio. So, so I every so often I will put in a song into the classroom. We have actually prepared a Happy with Carl Williams. So I just. I'm a hot air balloon that goes with the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm. Yeah, that's Happy with Pharrell Williams. And again, it's an example of an upbeat, lively song, easy enough to learn the words, easy enough to sing along, and easy enough to explain, what the song is about. Yeah, and if it works for you, do it. Yeah, is what I would say. Okay, but challenging, right? Again, I would say I would only make things very challenging if you're sure that this is what's going to work for them, right? I remember I had an editor once here in Bulgaria. He was a translator editor, and he loved things to be difficult. He loved working his way through difficult things. But I don't think that's for everyone. Again, but if and it probably can depend on what you're teaching. If you're teaching, surgery, or you're teaching, bridge engineering, you're teaching, something very difficult, I suppose it has to be challenging. It has to, it can't be easy, right? So again, if it's going to be challenging, I give a couple of examples here. Have a goal, right? They actually have a target, right? To use articles correctly. Again, using articles correctly in English is one of the most difficult areas. To get perfectly right, articles are difficult. To use tenses correctly is the same. So there's a goal, right? And then high-level tasks that require perseverance and intellect. Something that you've got to push away through. Over whatever, a long period, right? And pushing people out of their comfort zone, which is, I've also been a sports trainer. I've been a boxing and soccer trainer in my day. And, that's part of it. You push them out of their comfort zone. You don't say, if they say they can't do it, you say, yes, you can. And a lot of people find if you don't push them, the class doesn't work. Right? And again, there'll be a lot of people who would not thank you for pushing them too hard, right? So you've got to try and figure out what works, So challenging it, you've got to have different strategies. Right? For some people, if a class is too easy, they've lost interest. Right? I've had students say it to me, I need to be pushed harder, and I get it. There would be professors who would be regarded as very tough, right? And some students would love them, and a lot of students wouldn't like them at all. And the students that love them is the ones that like being pushed hard, liked being challenged. Again, it's not everyone that likes being pushed. So again, finding solutions. You set a problem and you have step-by-step levels. In other words, they can see the steps that is taken. And I once taught back in Ireland, I taught a class and there was a guy there who happened to be a teacher in the same institution, and he just loved the fact that at every step I was explaining how to do it, and he could see I do this step, next step, the next step, and it really suited him, right? And again, group, alone, and and scenarios, right? Finding solutions, scenarios can be very, very useful. And I give the example of a successful work interview. So, for instance, if you were teaching HR, I teach communications generally, and teaching HR people, I would get a lot of HR people would come. And so a successful work interview where you get them to create a job, right? Decide who in the group is going to apply for the job, how best to train them for that job, and how best to train them to get through the interview, and who would be successful and who wouldn't, right? And so you're using the entire class with a scenario where they are learning how to do a successful work interview, right? So what basically I'm saying is that it's getting darker and darker. I see this. Is that to make it engaging, first you have to understand yourself, and you have to understand your students, and make it an attempt to understand what your students like, right? And you have to be able to read body language. You have to be able to see, what works with one group. As I say, when I was teaching Chinese students and Indian students in the same classroom, the two of them were really chalk and cheese, right? And those who know Asia might say, Asia is all the same. It certainly isn't. And Europe is East Europe. There's definite cultural difference between East Europe and Western Europe. And I suppose America and West Europe, culturally might be reasonably close, but there are differences, and there are differences in every country. So you've got to work on yourself. Teaching it's a strange profession, right? You really have to teach yourself how to teach, right? You can get all the training you like, right? But no real training works for putting you in a classroom and actually teaching. Yeah, that you learn on the job. And if you were, I mentioned a bridge engineer, right? If you trained as a bridge engineer, right, you'd be working with a lot of bridge engineers and technical people, and they're all teaching you things, and you're all working together. With teachers, you work by yourself. You're in the room by yourself, with your students, obviously. But it's very difficult to get practical teaching training. Yeah? You nearly all the good teachers, became good by themselves, and nearly all the bad teachers just never were able to master it. And it's a lonely job, right, in that sense. You have to try and go to things like this, find out what it's like, try to see into other people's classrooms, but you always have to remember that even sitting in another person's classroom, and you're really impressed at how they teach, you may not be able to take the same approach, because it wouldn't work for you. Yeah. I said I'd probably tell a joke, so I'm going to tell a blonde joke, which you have to remember that I was blonde for, I don't know, 45 years or something like that. And anyway, this blonde was, she was back in Ireland, and the lottery was every Wednesday and Saturday, the national lottery. And on Wednesday, she'd say, "Dear God, let me win the lottery this week. I really need to win the lottery. It would fix my life." And Wednesday came, she didn't win, right? And then Saturday, the same. She said, "Please, God, let me win the lottery today. I really, really need it. I need to win this lottery to make my life good." And this was going on for weeks and weeks and weeks, right? And she kept, every Wednesday, every Saturday, saying, "Please, God, let me win the lottery." Right? So next one Wednesday, she was there and she was saying, please God, let me win the lottery. And next minute, a big booming voice came out of the clouds. You have to see me halfway. You have to buy a ticket. So unfortunately, I don't know whether that joke has worked or not because I can't see your reactions, but it's can be a good way, jokes, of releasing the tension and, getting them to forget that they're learning. And I think that's one of the keys. When they forget they're learning, they're probably learning. Okay, well, that's about it, really, what I have to say. Okay, well, thanks very much to everyone.